Okay, welcome everybody to this Zoom meeting, and it's we'd like to get as many people introduced to the Lydiard training as we possibly can. Colin and I, we want to continue what Arthur did, which was seeding the world with this training method and stopping people from killing themselves and hating running because they go about it the wrong way. We have, I think, a lot of new people. If you're new, would you just raise your hand if you haven't been to our courses before or anything? So we've got, yeah, we've got probably on the other ones quite a few new people. Yeah, wonderful. And then we have a lot of you that probably about a third to a half that have done the courses and just want to come back and see us again. That's right, because they miss us. Okay. Hi, Samuel. So we are doing coaches certification training programs, and we are offering some more courses. So I'd like to have you know about this Lydiard 1 and 2, which is suitable for anybody if you're just interested in how the body works and what good training looks like, because there is so much information out there, and we can get on the internet and we can look at all sorts of things, and everybody thinks they have the right way. One thing about the Lydiard training is that it has been around for a long, long time. It was started by this man called Arthur Lydiard from New Zealand. Arthur passed away in 2004 at the age of 86, but he spent 60 years of his life just dedicated to training and going around the world and telling people how to train correctly. And he coached Olympic champions across the board, and coaches who coached Olympic champions, and in all sorts of endurance sports. And he didn't forget that people who just wanted to get fit, who were never going to be Olympic champions, could also benefit from this type of training. So he started the first Joggers Club, which he passed on to Bill Bowerman from Nike, and he took it back, and that was a big part of the beginning of the running boom. And so it's a system that's been around for a long time, hugely successful. Many Olympic coaching and national teams have adopted this method as their official method, and it's probably the system that has influenced coaching more than anything else in the 20th century. And since he passed, we want to keep this alive and going. So we wanted to have this Lydiard myth busting, because there's a lot of people who have maybe heard the name or heard about the training, and they think maybe it's old-fashioned or have some ideas about it. So we'd like to dispel those Lydiard myths. And so I'm here with my partner in the Lydiard Foundation, who just, the Lydiard UK website was just launched. So I'll get Colin to tell you about that. He can give you the URL so you can go and have a look at it. And we have our guest, Greg Mcmillan, who is one of the premier coaches in the US, who's written numerous books, was with Arthur when he died, actually. Assisted him, and so he has a very strong connection to the Lydiard system, not just because of the training itself, but he knew the person. And joining us will be Rod Dixon, who is an Olympic bronze medalist. He won the New York City Marathon in 1983 in one of those iconic finishes with Jeff Smith lying on the ground in the background and Rod doing his victory pose. And bowing on one knee, and he's quite a theatrical and charismatic sort of person, so you will really enjoy him. He's in New Zealand at the moment, and he's will join us for the second hour because he didn't really want to get up at 5, I think. So you'll get Rod coming in. So I'm going to hand it over to Colin, and he's going to give you a little rundown on just Lydiard training in general, and then we'll go to the myth busting part of it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So hi everybody. I'm going to just share the screen if I may, just to show you just one slide that. Just let me go here. There we go. Yeah. Lorraine, could you have a look at the chat whilst I'm talking?
Certainly.
Yeah, good, good. Okay, so what we're going to do, hopefully this evening, is we're going to go through the 5 principles of Lydiard training. We take it in turns, hopefully. I haven't prompted people, Lorraine. You and Greg are going to be kept on your toes, but we'll see how we are. So they're on the left-hand side. And I was going to ask, Lorraine, how did you come across the 5 principles?
Well, when I first got into thinking this is something that I wanted to do, I looked at the Lydiard training, and people would get so hung up on certain aspects of it, like, oh, it's 100 miles a week, I couldn't possibly run 100 miles a week. And I would say, well, it's not about 100 miles a week, it's about aerobic conditioning. So I took these die-hard rules, because I don't believe in rules. Everything is an experiment of one, and we need to adapt it to the, Colin's laughing. We need to adapt the training to the individual. And so I reduced the training to a series of principles. And if we follow the principles, then we can do the correct volume, the timing, etc. if we follow these 5 principles. So as long as you're following them, you're pretty much on track with your training. If you get off any single one of these principles, then you're probably doing bad training. And so here's the 5 principles. The first one is that aerobic conditioning is the foundation. And this is because the energy that we need for any event that's over about 2 minutes is primarily aerobic. And aerobic is our ability to be able to take in oxygen, transport it through your whole system, convert it to energy so that your muscles can make a contraction. And we want that system to be, we actually have a renewable battery system, and we want that to be engaged and fully developed so that you can just do whatever you're doing for as long as you like. And that's how people train to run marathons. The marathon, by the way, is the energy that's required to run a marathon is 99.9% aerobic metabolism. So it makes sense that if you want to run a marathon, that you need to have this system as highly developed as you possibly can. But it also applies to people who want to run a mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, 10K, etc., half marathon. So aerobic conditioning is key, and it will be the limiting factor for most people. The second principle is that it's response regulated adaptation, which essentially it's a big phrase that means that every individual responds differently, and that when we adapt to the training, we need to do it in a way that is cognitive of what that individual is doing. So it's really important that the training is adapted to the individual, that the individual is not forced to adapt to the training program. And that's the trouble with a lot of cookie cutter training programs, is that they one size fits all. And if you're at either end of the bell curve, you might get into trouble pretty quickly with it. It's not going to suit you. So we need to have something that is fluid and adaptable to the individual. The third principle is that it's feeling based. And this means that we need to get our central navigation system in place. We need to know what our body is telling us. In this day of all this AI, and we tend to be very mentally focused group of people, that we need to get back into the body and be able to read the body. The body is primary. It tells you right away from the feelings through our senses what's going on. And we need to get a good rapport with that. So when people are out of touch with it, they do things that are crazy. They do things that hurt themselves. They overtrain, or they undertrain, or they do the wrong training at the wrong time, or they don't pace themselves well. So all those kinds of things because they're not connected in to what their body is telling us. So the important thing here is that by the way we train from the, and we'll see the pyramid here, from the bottom of the pyramid up, that we're always cognizant of what the body is doing, how the body is feeling, and responding to the training and adapting the training to the individual. Okay. The fourth is sequential development. So if you have a look here at the pyramid, you can see that it has a series of steps, and we work from the bottom of the pyramid up. So we do our aerobic conditioning, we go on to doing specific hill exercises, and each of them is a development that builds on the one that goes before it and prepares us for being able to run faster and faster paces. And then the fifth principle is that we need to have correct timing. Not just timing, correct timing, it should read there, Colin. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, correct timing means that we need to do the right type of work at the right time. And this way we can then develop the body to its optimum. So timing is what gives us our optimal development. And the whole idea of the Lydiard training is this: if you want to see what you can really do, what your best performance is, and most people, they train and they race way below what they're capable of. Or they train maybe above what they're capable of and race below what they're capable of. And so the whole idea of timing is that we do things in a correct sequence and everything at the correct time, so that when we arrive at the race, we're at our peak. And that is the art of being able to peak is not a great mystery, but it is to many people, because what they do is they tend to jumble everything together in the wrong sequence, or do something at the wrong time. And so when we do the courses, we show you exactly what workout to do at what time, and you will know why and how to put that together. So over to you, Colin.
Yeah, thanks. Greg, I've unmuted you, so if you want to jump in any time, just do that for me. So here's the pyramid here, and it shows you the phases that you go through in your training. So we start off here with the aerobic conditioning, and then we're going to move up to the hills. So when people say, oh, Lydiard is this, that I've never ever heard anybody say, oh, Lydiard, that's hill springing, hill bounding, fast hill running. There's the anaerobic phase, the integration phase, and then you ease down and you do the taper. So you have to move through the phases of the pyramid. And there's reasons why you do it in that order. And if we've got time, we might touch upon them this evening. But as Lorraine said, the aerobic conditioning is the most important one. It's the one that you spend most time on. It's also the one that your body takes longer to adapt to, and the adaptations can last over years and years and years. So you can keep improving, and your body will continue to adapt the more you do this aerobic conditioning. So I'm going to start off by my least favourite myth, Lorraine. and that is, I hear people say, oh, Lydiard, that's long, slow distance. And I've seen people on their Strava put LSD, and they put it on as, I don't know whether they're trying to reference Lydiard at all, but it drives me bonkers. So long, slow distance, and it comes from the aerobic conditioning. So I just want to have a look at long, and I want to have a look at the word slow, really. So the first thing is, let's have a look at what happens in the aerobic conditioning as if it's all slow. So I did this, what the paces might be. And this is for someone who goes out 7 days a week. And the easy chatty running is the dark green. My apologies to anybody that's blue-green colorblind. Then you go slightly faster on a Saturday and perhaps a Tuesday. So 2 runs are slightly faster. They're not going to get you gasping for air, but they're going to be what Colin Livingston would call sub-maximal runs. So they're just a little bit faster. And then on the Wednesday, we have the fartlek. So there'll be nice, faster little bits that we like to introduce 10-second lactic bursts into the fartlek. And on the Friday, you have a lovely slow recovery jog. So I think that's 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's at least 5 different speeds in there. So it uses the whole of your aerobic speeds, and it is aerobic because that's the energy system that we're trying to work. As you go up the pyramid, it's not slow at all. So there's bits in the hills where you're flying down the hills. There's bits in the anaerobic phase where you're running really quickly. So it isn't slow in the aerobic conditioning. It's a mixture of aerobics. It's certainly not slow further up the pyramid. And if Rod was here or Lorraine was here, or Greg, if you're a decent runner, Greg, and you're running chatty, I used to run 6.5-minute miles chatty, having a lovely conversation. Peter Snow, in his last ever interview, said he used to do the Waitarua run in 22 miles, chatting away. What could you run, Lorraine? What would be your easy running pace?
Well, back in the day, yeah, I could do easy running. I would do 7 or 8 minute miles. 7-minute miles was sort of my standard. Yeah. So, and I apologize for those of you that work in Ks now. But you know, 4 minutes, 4.5, I think, something like that. I can't remember. But anyway, yeah.
Describe that as being slow.
Right. So, you know, we have a question from Jan, who has said if you're training for a marathon, you don't do long aerobic running for 14 weeks before the race. Jan, would you like to clarify that?
She's muted and I can't.
Oh, she's muted. Oh, okay.
Yeah. To mute. I've got full screen on. Unmute.
Oh, okay. I can.
I can answer the question. Yeah. We go through the same, one of the questions that we're asked Rod, because Rod came 3rd in the Olympic 1500 meters and he won the New York Marathon. And a lot of people think that he trained completely differently for both events, but he didn't. The base, the aerobic conditioning on the base of the pyramid was exactly the same. And probably there was much less difference than most people think between Rod's 1500 meter training and his marathon training. It's only towards the top of the pyramid that things would have been changed around and the speed, a greater amount of speed would have been put in. So when he joins us, we're asking that question. And it's the same for everybody. So in the pyramid, it's 10 weeks for the aerobic conditioning. The marathon runner would do the hills. The marathon runner would do some anaerobic running, but it would be probably longer. And we clarify what we mean by anaerobic running when we do the course. And so, yeah, the marathon runner would do that. The other thing is about the long, because some of the days, the pyramid, very importantly, has effort and recovery at the top, because it's all about being balanced. It's about balancing your effort with your recovery. So the runs aren't necessarily long. The runs are, so the Monday run might be 45 minutes. That might be 40 minutes for the jog. The out and back might be. The long run, on the other hand, is, if the myth has any foundation, it's in the long run, because if you go out slower, then you will get your body to fat burn more. And it's a real advantage to go more gently on your long runs, because you pre-program your body to burn fat if you're a marathon runner.
So I've unmuted Jan.
Yeah.
Jan, is your question answered, or did you think that you needed to do 14 weeks slow running before your marathon?
No, it's more that the principles are that you don't do the same type of running at the same time. Because most marathon programs do all those types of running in 1 week. You do a long run, you do aerobic runs, you do hill runs. Whereas your principle is that you separate those things. But if you follow that principle, then for the 14 weeks prior to your marathon, when you're on all the other phase, the hill phase and the anaerobic phase, the hill phase and the anaerobic phase, then you're not doing the aerobic phase. But I'm assuming you are actually going to be. You have to carry on that aerobic phase, surely.
Yes.
So I don't quite understand how it pans out in the later. So the program that Colin's shown on the screen looks like an aerobic phase program.
Yes.
So I'm wondering what a program would look like when you're in the hill or the anaerobic phase program.
And the
long run every week.
Yes, it is the important priority, the top priority, Jan, in the hill training phase is the long run. That's the most important session of the week.
So that stays throughout the program.
And the reason why I put this in, and the reason why we put it into the course, is because most people think down here, they think that there's a huge anaerobic part in the anaerobic phase, but actually the anaerobic is at its maximum 20%. And you've cued me in really nicely, because here's a diagram. It's got Greg's name in, so I was going to rather hope he was going to take over.
Yeah, Greg? Oh, it's wonderful.
So to answer your question, Jan, and you've cued me in beautifully, is that there's the law of diminishing returns. So once you've done that training for 8 weeks or 10 weeks, you begin to lose the rapidity of how quickly you're going to improve. So you do more. If you did more and more, what would happen is that you just wouldn't improve as much. So after about 10 weeks, you can add another stimulus to the body. And that second stimulus is the hill phase, which strengthens your body and strengthens your muscles. And so that adds another stimulus and raises your fitness. And then once that hill resist, you're beginning to feel more powerful, and perhaps the law of diminishing returns hits, then you can add your anaerobic training and you reach a new height of fitness. Whereas if you try to mix them all together in what we call tube training, you're just always one's counteracting the other. It's much better to build up one until law of diminishing returns and then add the other.
But you still maintain the other ones for a maintenance level.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
That makes sense.
The key physiological point, Jan, is you have to do less to maintain your fitness than you do to gain it. So once you've gained your aerobic running, then to maintain that fitness, you need to do less. So you'll still do the vast amount of your week will still be gentle aerobic running in the hill phase, but you're adding a new stimulus of the hills. Greg.
Greg.
Greg, what were you going to say? Can you add to that for me?
Yeah, I think we see this a lot.
What sort of things would you be looking at for when to move someone on to a new phase of training?
Well, luckily we do have so many decades now of experience of using the system. And what I experience a lot now is runners who are doing what's called tube training, where they are mixing all the components of training into every week. And what we see is they get fit very fast, but then they plateau. So I have a lot of athletes, usually adult recreational runners who are getting more serious, coming in, and when I look at their training, they're doing all the components all the time, week after week after week, and their performance ability plateaus. Of course, then they get frustrated because they're not improving. So then we go back and we start to kind of get back into the system you have on the screen where we are developing each component in the right order. And as a result, they're able to get a fitness boost from every change in training. And that way we can lift them out of that plateau. So one of the challenges that coaches are having right now as sort of the new running boom and people doing sort of a go run on Thursday, long run on the weekend, they do that almost year round, is that they're plateauing. We have to remember the body and the mind need this break. They need this stress-rest cycle on sort of a macro level to be able to keep going to the next level. And if you do it correctly, you can still race well even during the aerobic conditioning component, right? Because a lot of athletes still want to go out and participate in races. They can still do that. But ultimately, they'll have a longer career and they'll be able to really see how good they can be if they have a little bit more of this periodization or sequencing of the training. You'll see that a lot with adult runners now because there's so much information about what is the best type of training. So they'll say, well, high intensity interval training is good. Well, let's put that in the week. Oh, well, I need to improve my lactate threshold. Let's put that in the week. And they end up sort of cramming everything in. I always pull them back and say, let's do it in the correct order. Usually then they reduce their injuries. They have fewer of those bad workouts, and they see their performance level getting higher and higher, yet they don't feel that they're training as hard. And that's a really nice mix for athletes. And certainly for me, it's worked very well.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Greg. The other point that I'd like to make is the point I made earlier about the aerobic running, that your body can adapt year after year. The adaptations happen over a very long time. So the more aerobic running you do, the fitter you'll be. The anaerobic training, you can train your anaerobic capacity in about 5 weeks. So you do it fast and last, some might say. So you run the fast bit, the anaerobic bit later. And it's just the icing on the cake. And then what you have to do once you've done the anaerobic training is to just integrate your training and then taper for the race. And it works beautifully for marathon runners, but it does also for track runners or whatever. I love your example, yeah, the recreational runners. Greg, oh, I just want to, don't you hate it? Oh, I can't do that. Okay, so really don't like long, slow distance. So can I ban it, please, everybody? Because no, Wendy says no, Wendy, you've got to ban it. Okay, so I'm going to give you an alternative, Wendy. I'm going to give you an alternative. I don't want LSD. I don't want to ever see that. Okay, I'm going to have LCR. Okay. LCR stands for loads of chatty running, okay? Because you're going to do a massive amount of aerobic running in your base phase, but it's all going to be chatty, but it's not slow because some of us run faster than others. It's certainly not all long. Some of it is short because we need to recover. And it's not one speed either. It's lots of different aerobic speeds with a bit of fartlek thrown in. So that's our first one done. I'm going to hand over to Lorraine. I'm handing you over my favourite one that I normally get on my high horse about, Lorraine, because I think you do it better than me. So the other one of the Lydiard classic myths and why I want to do response-regulated training. I'm handing over the second principle to you, Lorraine, response-regulated training. Let me tell you what I see, and I wonder if the people here can see this. So let me tell you, in the late 1950s and early 1960s, Arthur Lydiard had a group of athletes who were very highly trained and were running a lot of miles in the week, perhaps 100 miles in the week. And they used to do, and my pronunciation's not too good, Lorraine, so you can correct me, the Waitarua route in Auckland in New Zealand. That's good. And it was 22 miles long, and it was significantly hilly, and he made his Olympic athletes do it. So go away after this meeting and look at the London Marathon training plan or the Manchester training plan or the Snowdonia Marathon training plan, or dare I say, I don't know this, I haven't looked at this one, the Boston, Massachusetts training plan. And guess what's still in there? A 22-mile run. So that's a myth of Lydiard training, is the Sunday run is a 22-mile run. Now, I know people, and Paul and Wendy and people in Shropshire, they know the same people I do. And they're doing their marathon plans, Lorraine. And this marathon plan says 22 miles because it's a staple for them to do.
Oh, no.
So on a Sunday morning, round about 7:30, they get up. They say goodbye to their families wish them well, and off they set on their Sunday morning 22-mile run. By mid-afternoon, the families had lunch, and the runner comes back from their 22, so rather fatigued. I thought, how can we link that to response-regulated training, Lorraine? How is that not good? And how can we get rid of the Lydiard 22-mile long run myth?
Well, Lydiard was pretty smart about it, because he started off with these champions who did this huge run every Sunday, and sometimes they got so fit they could do it back to back. And so then he started to coach joggers, and he realized very quickly that this run was way beyond the scope of these joggers. So he figured out pretty quickly that it was better to do it by time and not distance. So 2 hours, at 2 hours, a whole bunch of things kick in with your body. And this is mostly to do with microcirculation. And microcirculation is what provides all those little vessels, muscle fibers, etc., with the ability to be able to produce oxygen, to use oxygen and produce energy. And so 2 hours was like a threshold. So with beginners, what we do is we work them up, get them to run. The first threshold is an hour continuously without stopping. And we have programs for that. And then the next part is to build them up to 2 hours without stopping. And usually it starts to go much quicker once you get past an hour, because the training, if you do it the way it is with the pyramid, it's not linear, it's exponential. So you start to make these series of adaptations and they build on themselves. So it starts off slowly, but then the curve goes up, and hopefully you reach the top of your curve at the race that you are aiming for. So the whole idea is that we get comfortable. So with being response regulated is we need to build a basis first that we can work with. And that basis is your oxygenating ability. But there's another limiting factor here, and that is your musculoskeletal system. And especially the tendons and ligaments where the white tissue is, and it's white because it doesn't get much blood supply. And that takes a long time to strengthen up. And so often if somebody gets this cardiovascular boost and they're doing the training and they're feeling really good, but they've got a sore leg or a sore Achilles or knee or something like that, and that becomes a limiting factor. So the whole idea is that we have to pay attention to all parts of self and what's going on. And so my rule is that you can only progress as fast as your slowest part. The thing that hurts rules. It rules the roost until it comes into a coherent and copacetic relationship with the rest of you. So the slow guy on the bus might be the knee or whatever, and so we take it slowly. And we gradually build up time-wise, and we build that basis. And once we have the basis, then you can really start to go and start to train properly. But the first part, really the aerobic part, is just to get you ready for training. Greg, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, the core thing that I learned from Arthur in my time was it's the do the training so you can do the training so you can finally do the training. And he was really good, and he would finish these talks that he would do, and he would ask questions.
Yeah, Greg,
Yeah.
can I just, you're very echoey. Can people hear Greg properly? Or no. Do you have any headphones or anything?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, yeah.
So we're going to say, this is where Lorraine and I diverge a little bit, because I say I would tell people, and Gosha knows this, a maximum 2.5 hours for anybody. I coach someone who does 2.5 hours for the marathon. He does a 22-mile training run because he does it in under 2.5 hours. But if I'm coaching, I've coached someone who wanted to get under 5 hours. So she never ran more than 2.5 hours either. And she ran 4 hours 30, and she was more than happy. But we do get this, you have to do 22 miles to mentally be able to survive the marathon. And that 22 miles is still a Lydiard myth. What do you think about the psychological point, Lorraine? How would you overcome that when people would say to you, I need to do 22 miles to be confident enough to do a marathon?
Yeah, you do a 22-miler and then you come to the marathon and you're too tired. Yeah, and really it takes time, and it takes developing confidence in the system. But once you get in it, you do. And it's not what you do any one workout. It is really what happens over the whole course of the training period that counts. And so I tell people that if they can run a half marathon in training, they can run a marathon on race day. Fortunately, most people believe me. And that is true. So you can, the whole idea is, why have the mental confidence if the body is tired or you've got dead legs or you're overtrained? The whole idea is that you go to the race with the biggest capacity, the biggest aerobic capacity that you can possibly have. And you want to be rested enough to be able to use it on the day. So that's what I would tell somebody. So, you know, and I also ask people to choose whether they would rather have a good-looking training diary or whether they would rather have the fastest possible race. And often they have to make the choice. So, okay. Greg, how are you going? How's your...
Well, I plugged in my
mic.
So does this sound better?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah.
So, you know, step 1, plug in the mic. Step 2, talk into the mic. I got it a little out of order. We talked about sequencing being very important. There we go. What I was trying to say before was what I learned from being with Arthur during the time we were together was that ultimately the training comes down to do the training so you can do the training so you can finally do the training. It was all about doing the training you were ready to do. And I think one of the myths or the confusions that happens with Lydiard a lot is, you know, people read the book, and the book was really written about how the Olympic level athletes trained. And then there was this gap to how do I use that with my athletes? But when I was with him, what I learned was you don't have athletes doing something they're not prepared to do. So it was all about building each of the systems to be ready for the next level of training. So you may have to stall development in moving quickly through, because a lot of athletes, they want to move quickly, right? They want to start doing training they're not ready to do yet. But I feel like in the Lydiard system, it's all about, let's do this training to prepare you to be able to do future training. And if you do that correctly, then you don't have to worry with injuries. You don't have to push somebody beyond the point that they can tolerate. And that makes the training, the adaptations and the benefits and the fitness level go up at a really nice rate. So I think regarding the response regulated, it is, what is the athlete ready for? And if they're not ready, give them some more time. Let them be developed so they can actually do the training. Because from Arthur, what I really took was, You want to be doing your absolute best training right before the event, right? That's where you want to be feeling your best, running your best. Everything before that is all preparation. And the better you can do that prep, then the better you'll be able to do in your race specific work, that work that's closest to your event. So for me, that is the foundational component of the Lydiard method, is do the training so you can do the training, so you can finally do the training. You know the training you want your athletes to do. You've got to get them ready to be able to handle that. That means it cannot be a one size fits all. It means it must be that you're evaluating the athletes and you're getting that feedback. Anytime the body's getting tight or achy or you have a pain, that is that red flag. It's a warning sign saying we're advancing too quickly. If you listen to that, then you don't have to worry with injuries. Those athletes can develop in the way that Arthur was doing with his athletes back in the day.
So great advice, Greg. What about knocking the 22-mile myth? Are you going to support the 22-miler? Or are you
No, I don't think that. One of the great things that Arthur did, you know, his first book was in miles, as Lorraine mentioned, and then he moved to time, because it was a recognition that miles are different for everyone. So a 22-miler for a very fit and fast athletes, I've coached athletes that run the marathon in the Olympics. Obviously, they can run 22 miles every weekend. It only takes them a little over 2 hours. But if you have somebody who their average training pace is 12 minutes per mile, that's an entire day, as you mentioned, that they're out. That recovery is going to take too long. So you have to look at the athlete, and I prefer to look at it in time the way that Arthur did and say, okay, let's start. As Lorraine said, let's build you up to where you can run continuously for an hour. Then let's get to an hour and a half. Then let's get to 2 hours. So we don't have to get so dogmatic with this has to be. So what I took from Arthur, I had extended conversations with him about this long run, right? Because it has bled into so many components. In fact, if you look at how a lot of coaches have reverse engineered training, they'll say, oh, the long run must be 20 to 25% of your weekly mileage. Where does that come from? It comes from that long run that Arthur had those guys doing. They were doing 22 miles out of 100 miles a week. There you go. There's 22%. So for me, it's less about the exact mileage, and it's more about what is that athlete ready for? How do we build them up so they can safely complete the distance that they need to get ready for their event? When I've coached charity runners, new marathoners, we're not running 22, 24, 26 miles in training. When I coached professional athletes, we would do that all the time because that's only a 2 to 3 hour run for them. So again, it's a balance of what is that stimulus doing to the athlete and how quickly can they recover. So I think that, again, as you're talking about these myths, long, slow distance, that was just a reaction because before Lydiard, it was all about intervals on the track. That was the Igloy method. They were doing intervals. So the big change was doing these longer runs where you weren't running on the track. Same thing with the long run. We need the long runs, but it doesn't have to be 22 miles over a hilly route for every runner. So for me, it's all about what is that runner ready for.
Thanks, Greg. It's the same answer, Greg, for the next one. And that is, let me just tell the little story. If you lived in Auckland and you were a rugby player and you had a horrific rugby injury and you had a withered left arm, I think, and you approached this man who just lived down the street, and he said, look, if you want to win the Olympics, you've got to do 100 mile a week. And another guy that looked like a huge, muscular, looked more like a tennis player than a runner, he said, yeah, you've got to do 100 mile a week. One was Murray Halberg and the other was Peter Snell, and they both won their gold medals in the 1960 Olympics within an hour. So you might have gone to Arthur Lydiard in the late 1950s and say, and he might have told you, look, you've got to be committed. You've got to be able to do 100 mile a week. But that was 70 years ago. What do we say now, Lorraine, about people doing 100 miles a week? Well, the same rules, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Greg, but the same rules apply. We do it by time. We don't do it by, you build up to it, you train to train to train. So let's just quickly cover that. So what about the 100 mile a week myth? Lorraine?
Well, I think most people don't do 100 miles, and I didn't do 100 miles. I did around 80 or 90, and it went up and down with what phase I was in, and etc. And most people don't have the time to commit to doing that kind of volume. And the system still works if you have lesser goals. You know, if you just want to perform the best that you can with the time you've got, the system works beautifully. So 100 miles a week was popularized because at the time it seemed so much. It just was like a phenomenal thing. So it's sort of like, here's these Olympic champions that Arthur Lydiard's coaching, and they run 100 miles a week, and everybody go, whoa, whoa, well, they're like Supermen, you know. So, but the whole idea was that they ran a high volume, and so they got a very, very good aerobic capacity, and that's what we do. We do as much as we can with the time we've got, and put all the elements together. So, but the majority of the pyramid is going to be aerobic conditioning. So everybody's on a different pyramid. Everybody's on their own pyramid, and they'll all go to different levels. But the thing about the Lydiard pyramid is that when I came to the US and started to coach there, and Lydiard training is so embedded in the New Zealand culture, and it was then, so we all trained Lydiard. That was just, everybody coached and trained Lydiard way. Because who's going to argue with the kind of success that Lydiard brought to New Zealand in his running? So, but in the US, there was a whole different culture, and because of the collegiate system, there was a real emphasis in the country on intervals. And typically, you know, people love their intervals here, and they seem to think that doing interval training, particularly the quarter, was the way to do it. So, you know, everybody would be running down to the track and doing, you know, 12, 20 quarters or something like that to try and get fit. And what it did was, in the collegiate system, caused a lot of burnout. So I would see runners that would be recruited to teams, and then they would come to me to have them coach them. Generally, they'd go to a marathon or something, but they'd suffered from collegiate burnout, and you had to go pretty gently with them, and they would be a bit, you wouldn't want to give them too many intervals. They were sort of sensitized to it, that kind of workout. So what I found was that a lot of Americans, because of the way they trained, they were really cheating themselves on what they could perform in their races. Because when you get to a peak, then the sum of the parts, the race is much more than the sum of the parts. So it's a quantum leap. You actually, and it's an incredible feeling when you peak for something, when you find that you've got all the components there, and you know, the last part is you take a taper, and you let everything, the body, just come back and do a super recovery, and man, you get out there and you have wings on your feet, and it's like you can do no wrong, and you get in the flow, and it's just incredible. And when you get that feeling, winning is easy. And I'm just talking at my level, but you know, everything you do is a personal best, and just race after race. And I'd love that, and you know, and I would live for that. I'd be training so that, you know, I can't wait to get to the race where I got that incredible feeling again. And that's the beauty of the training. So if you have training times and race times that are linear, that are the same, then you're not training correctly. And you'd really benefit from trying a Lydiard pyramid. And but you have to adhere to the principles, because you can certainly overtrain on the pyramid or do it badly. So we teach you how to do that correctly through these principles. I'll hand it over. Greg, do you want to say something about peaking?
Yeah, oh no, I'm going to come to that later.
Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. We're working through the principles. Okay, yeah.
I just want to say that I've managed to peak a few times in my younger days, and it's such a wonderful, amazing feeling when you are just, like you say, wings on your feet. And people are amazed. The thing that I liked is people are amazed by your performance. So I used to come 10th, 11th in felt races. I peaked for this race. I'm 40 seconds quicker. And when I got to the hill in front of everybody, what the hell are you doing here, Colin? Oh, it's because I wanted to win this race. But that it lives so long in your memory because it's such a great feeling to have. And it's just lovely. Rod's not with us yet. He's still snoring in bed. Greg, I'm going to put you on the spot here. We haven't rehearsed this. Greg and I haven't even talked before today. Greg, are you there? I need you.
I'm here.
Good. Okay. So I'm going to miss because Rod bagged feeling-based training. So I've got you down for sequential training, but I've got a couple of questions, a couple of myths for you to have a go at.
Okay.
Number one is the Lydiard training is not for everyone. It's only for elite athletes. What do you think?
No, because the basics of the Lydiard method work on human physiology, and that is the same with all of us. We all have the same physiology. It's just some of us chose our parents a little bit different, and so we're faster versus slower. But the way the body adapts and the mind adapts to the training is all the same. So if you give the same runner, any runner that use the principles, you're going to get them very fit and very fast, and particularly over the long haul. So I wouldn't say that the Lydiard training is only for elite runners. It definitely has to be modified, right? You were just talking about Arthur had his guys running 100 miles a week. It doesn't make any sense that you would take a beginning runner who's training, who just came to you and started a running program, that they're going to run 100 miles per week. That doesn't make any sense, right? But the principles are, we're going to build your aerobic system. We're going to develop a body that can handle faster running. We're going to introduce you to more variety in your training as you get fitter, so that then you can start to do more repetition work and you can do more race type training. That all works no matter if you're an elite runner or you're a beginning runner. And again, it comes down to do the training so you can do the training so you can finally do the training. I certainly apply the Lydiard principles to, I have runners that run 15 miles per week. I have some that run 150 miles per week. So it can be used and adapted to any type of runner that comes to you for help. And the nice thing is it's safe. If you do it correctly, those athletes should have a very positive experience. They should build their body over time. They should have those breakthrough experiences feeling like, I didn't realize I was even that fast yet. That's what, even with the pro athletes that I coach, they kept going, I can't believe I'm that fast already. I don't feel like I've done that type of work. And that's because you're laying the foundation. You're building that pyramid. Performance can come. So I think that's another big myth that is incorrect, that it's only for elite athletes. Now, if you were to try to follow the training from his original book, that would be too much for the recreational runner, because it was written to say, this is what I did with my pro athletes. But if you modify it, you sort of bring it down to the level that the athlete's ready for, I think it works great for everyone.
And that's where the principles come in, aren't they? That's where we put across the principles. You use those principles. You build the training. I'd like to just...
And I just interrupt for just a second. And that's the beauty of how Lorraine teaches the clinic, is that I think she does an excellent job of going from, if you read the book and you're confused, or you're saying, how can I have my athletes doing that? And then she shows you how to apply it to any athlete. So if you're working with new runners, or maybe you have age group athletes who are competing, like you were saying, for positions in their age group or qualifying for Boston, all the way up to those more at the front of the sport. I think the clinics give you that understanding of how to apply the principles to any athlete.
Okay, so thank you, Greg. And Rod has joined us. So I've unmuted him. Here he is. He's waving his hands here. He's out of bed. He's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So Rod is doing a lot of work with children and getting children out and healthy and exercising in very, very fun ways. And he's had a program in the US. How many kids are on your program in the US in the schools, Rod?
Well, currently we average about 50,000 a year, but we've topped 500,000 now over the period it's been developed. Back, well, it really did start in New Zealand in 1990. We had the program going here, and then when I worked with the City of Los Angeles Marathon, we brought it in there and adapted it to the Los Angeles program, Las Vegas, Chicago, where else do we do? Salt Lake City. And so it developed from there, and now certainly the biggest program is in Los Angeles with the Los Angeles Unified School District, and there's over 43,000 kids go through the program annually.
So wonderful, wonderful work that Rod's doing, and it's really important because we do have declining health and fitness levels. So there you go. He's got the tortoise. And the tortoise is the one who knows about aerobic conditioning, if you know your tortoise in here story. So that's an important one for us because we all need to be tortoises first. And you know why it's a tortoise and not a turtle? Because he taught us. Okay, all right. Hey, also, it was Rod's 70th birthday last week, and he doesn't look a day over 50, do you, Rod?
Wow.
Some days I feel 95.
Yeah, don't remind him. Rod.
Happy birthday.
Hi, Colin.
We've got you on feeling-based training. What have you got to say about it? Don't forget, I'm sure you know, but the people in the rooms, and the 75 of us here, wow. I would imagine 74 are living in the world of Strava. So what do you think about feeling-based training? How did it work for you? And how you put it into the modern world that we live in?
Yeah, well, it is. And I was working with the City of Los Angeles Marathon and their LA Roadrunner program, and I was putting through over 2,000 runners per year through, and it was, and most of it was feeling-based training. We didn't have a lot of the technology and telemetry, and so I had to. My three favorite words are learn by doing. So you're going to have to learn how to feel about what you're doing. You're going to have to learn and experience these this journey where you have to express to yourself what you're feeling. And I still love the idea of people writing a diary, to write down, your training, how you felt about it, what you experienced, what did it mean to you. Be very careful to put in your own words and don't be influenced by others. I think, feeling-based training is, it's not going to take a couple of weeks to get this feeling based. It takes months and months. It takes a long time. And that's the whole principles and philosophy of Lydiard. It's the pyramid. And you've got to build that slow aerobic base in order to build it. It's just the same as I used to get the runners to if you see a building site, I say, keep an eye on that building site. And they'll tell you 6 months later, well, they're not doing very much. I said, no, they're laying a foundation. And then once they get that foundation down, then you start to see one story a week going up. So they can build whatever you want if you've got the foundation. And so I've got to get the people to start thinking that the feeling-based training is so very, very important.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to knock a few myths out the room, Rod. And one of those is that the Lydiard is a very rigid system. And I'm aware that you haven't, it's really nice that you haven't heard the rest of the previous conversations, because we haven't prompted you on this. Honestly, team, we haven't prompted him. He's there. So it's one of the myths is it's a very rigid system. Now, you and your brother, who was coaching you for as all your career, Rod, or?
Well, John, my brother John, he was 3 years older, and so I mean, if he could do it, he believed that I could do it, and so there and of course he was very influenced by Lydia, because Lydia came around to our track club here in Nelson and coached the coaches, and then the coaches were able then to put it down to us kids. But John was very, very careful, because he understood that, you know, a lot of the runners were taking the Lydiard system as a very rigid training. And John said, we've got to be like the piano accordion. You've got to be flexible. You've got to go with the feeling. It's got to be feeling based. And so, so really how we trained and how we prepared was very, very much, once again, it was not what you did today. It was what you did, you know, not what you did today. Today's training influenced the next 3 to 4 days. And so, in fact, the last 2 or 3 days influenced the next 4, 5, 6, 7 days. So you had to understand that what you're doing to do to training today, just leave it at that. Sometimes we would do our training and we go, wow, let's go and do another 5 miles. We feel so good. He'd say no, because he said, your training, you won't improve when you train. You improve when you recover. So if you're not recovering, you're not progressing. And so that was the big thing that we learned to understand, is feeling based. Tell me how you feel today. Now, sometimes we would go out and, I mean, my brother would he'd look at me and he'd say, now, what did you do on Monday, Tuesday? And I go, oh, I ran with the club guys. He said, oh, yes, you probably all were racing each other. He said, that's why you're flat today. So instead of coming to the track, just go for a 6, 7 mile easy jog on the trails, because he said you haven't recovered from racing one another. So we had learned very quickly that, you know, it wasn't today's training, it was the whole month's training, and you learn to understand to balance it like that. And so that flexibility was very, very important.
So if Lorraine was to say every training is an experiment of one, how would yours have differed from traditional Lydiard training?
Well, first of all, we lived in Nelson, and so we had to adapt those principles and philosophy to our terrain where we were training. We were very much a lot of cross country, a lot of trails, a lot of dirt roads. We didn't run on the roads and on the concrete very, very much at all. So we understood. We had the beach, we had the golf courses, we had around the perimeter of the airport, which was all grass running. And so we knew that some of our training was going to be a little bit more difficult. And so therefore didn't require, you know, if the schedule said you ran an hour and a half, well, we knew that hour and a half, we could, our stress levels and our the training terrain was probably we ran only going to run an hour. So we wouldn't run that extra just to have the mileage. We tended to run more to time than to mileage.
We're all moving to Nelson now, Rod.
I've said that to you for 50 years.
It's a common theme, Rod, that we don't run for miles, because one of the myths that we tried to knock out the room was the 22-mile long run. Now, you're a sub 2 hour 10 marathoner. So what was the longest run you ever did? So in the training for, say, let's say training for sort of spring 1983.
Yeah, I think, you know, some of my runs, the most long Sunday runs, and very, very aerobic, which was the talk test. If you couldn't carry on a conversation, you were probably running too fast. So and I tended to do a lot of that training, especially when I was living in the US and training the half marathon and towards the New York City Marathon. I tended to do a lot of my training on my own because running with a group, you tended to test each other. So those long runs, I wanted to be long and slow. So they were around 2:45, sometimes very close to 3 hours I would run. And that training was at least a minute and a half.
Hang on, Rod. I'm just muted you for a minute. Please stay put. Don't run away for breakfast. Where is he? I can do it like this. Oh, come on. Got it. Sorry, Rod. What I've done is I had to mute everybody, and then I unmute everybody, and then unmute everybody. So now they're able to unmute themselves to ask you questions, because I'm sure lots of people want to. But I'm going to use this opportunity to just educate some of the people in athletics, because I've been talking to someone you might know today, Colin Livingston, and he told me about a race that you were in that I'd forgotten about. So you've been in 4 of the greatest races in the history, in recent living memory. So Rod, everybody, was in the 1972 Olympic 1500 meters, where the reigning 1500 meter champion Kip Keino of Kenya was coming down the home straight with Pekka Vassila, who beat him. It's one of the classic races of all time, and Rod was battling. Did you get third that day, Rod?
I did.
Yeah, good. then you were the same race.
The medal's here somewhere.
Yeah, good. And then Rod was in the race, the Commonwealth Championship final 1500 in 1974, where a guy from Tanzania, Philbert Bayi, when the gun went, set off at world record pace. And Colin, who knows these things, said he went through 800 meters in 1:51, and you and Rod Dixon were flat out trying to keep up with him. He broke the world record. Where did you come that day, Rod?
Well, that's just incredible, because it was a race of our lives. I knew that. That's it. Yeah. But I remember I crossed the finish line, and I was with my great friend. I went over to my great friend Graham Crouch, who finished just behind me. And sadly, we lost Crouchy last year. But I went over and I said, and I looked up at the scoreboard, and I said, Crouchy, I've just run the 5th fastest time in history and finished 4th in the race. How do we pick that? So,
how does that work? Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That day, Rod. And then I'm going to jump forward. 1976, Lasse Viren wins his 4th gold medal, and you're pushing him around that last lap. And some German dives over the line. What's that about?
Yeah.
So, yeah, 4th. And then the other iconic race that you were in had a happy ending. And here comes Dixon. I think you can watch it on YouTube. So talk us through, because we've been talking about having wings on your heels. And when you reach the peak, everything's just going. You can't believe how great it feels. How did that winning the New York Marathon feel? You did look a bit tired at the end, to be honest.
Well, in fact,
You have that sort of peak, I'm in my peak fitness. How did you know you're in your peak fitness?
Well, it is feeling based. I'm convinced it is. I mean, you're training. Yeah, my journey was what I like to call it the incredible journey, because it really was the highs and the lows. It's like I was going across country, and I was in the valleys, I was in the Rockies, I was in the mountains, I was back in the Rockies, and so it really is a journey, and you learn from each experience, and you try to narrow it down so that you've got a system and a program that is working for you on a daily basis. And there again, it's feeling-based training. I think a lot of the the preparation that I did for the New York City Marathon is I'd learned all those years before some of the things that I should not have done. I remember I said, don't be easily influenced by others, or don't be influenced by others. Be very careful how you go about your training. And there again, don't go out running with all the other runners because you want to show them how good you are, or you want to test yourself. You test yourself in your time trials, you test yourself in your preparation. And so that journey for 1983, for the first time in my life, I really did train without interference or without distraction. And I finally put it all together so that when I was on the start line, I knew that this was going to define who I really was.
Yeah. Do you feel sorry for Jeff Smith?
Absolutely. Every day I give him a call.
Yeah, good. It was an
Yeah,
amazing,
Jeff.
just an iconic picture. You got it on your wall, have you, Rod, the picture?
Well, not in this room, but yes, it's you know,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Oh, Greg. Wow. Have you got it on your wall, Greg? There
Well,
you
I
go.
just moved, but it's always behind me. I always have Rod looking
He
over my
carries it
shoulder.
around. Yeah. Where's my picture?
You haven't sent it to me.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, Greg, have you got anything to add about how you can coach feeling-based training?
Well, I think that's the big challenge, as you kind of alluded to. Today, we have so much technology that the runners can use. And it's wonderful technology, right? The ability to be able to monitor pace and distance and heart rate and power and so many of those things. But ultimately, those are only tools to help the athlete learn themselves. And a lot of what I'm having to do in my own coaching is get people to transition from letting the device drive their training to letting them drive their training. One of the beauties of it being summer now, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, is that everybody's having to go off feeling now because the devices don't work as well, right? You can't run the same pace when it's hot and humid. Your heart rate's going to be much higher in hot and humid conditions. So trying to wean them away from relying so much on devices and pace charts. I even created a pace calculator on my site, so a lot of people know me that way, but that was only to give you a guide, to get you in the ballpark, and then you could learn by doing, as Rod always says. You could do the training and learn, okay, this is supposed to be, in this pace range, I feel medium hard, I feel hard. How does that affect you? So all of my training is trying to move people to where we use the tool to really learn yourself. Because ultimately, I'm saying if you can learn yourself in training, you will always have a successful day. You will always have successful training because you can modify the training so you get the most out of yourself. You can always have a successful race because you can modify how you're pacing yourself to get the most from yourself every day, whether it's hot and humid or windy. So to me, it's all about bringing it back to how are you feeling the training and what does that inform us. Every coach that is good will ask the athlete every day, how are you feeling? That's the first thing when they show up. How are you feeling? And then they're processing that and saying, okay, they feel good. We can go with the training plan, or you're not feeling good. We need to modify. So when you watch athletes and coaches interact, that's what's happening. It's all feeling based. I know we like the numbers, but ultimately we're coming back to how the athlete's feeling, and that is the guide for the training.
Well, the physiology doesn't know numbers.
Right.
So its feedback system is it uses feelings to tell you what's going on inside you, and but a lot of us have that system maybe skewed in some way. And so in the base training period, when you go out and you're just taking it easy and you're relaxed and you're not worried about measuring yourself, because it's this constant measuring of ourselves that gets us out of our feeling base, and we start to then use this outside measure to define how we're doing. And it's really ask about face. I didn't want to say that, but anyway, it's backwards. So we really want to make it from the inside out so that we are in control, and we have a relationship with our training that's workable, because it is very fluid. We're changing all the time. We never feel the same way at any moment than we did the moment before. It's very dynamic. And so we're riding these waves, like Rod talked about, the troughs and the highs, and we need to be able to ride those and know what they mean and not get stuck in a trough, because a lot of people do. They're working in a trough, and we should, by nature, if we're doing it right, be feeling good as our baseline. And so how do we get to that place when we find it's a drudgery, or we're constantly tired and we have to force ourselves? And it's not, the secret of doing well is not all will. The will is just there to set an intention. And then the training itself is getting into feeling the body and allowing it to do its thing, and to do it well with by stimulating it with the training and allowing it to recover and adapt, so that by the time you get to the race, you're the best possible athlete you could be on that day.
So we've got one more to go, and I just quickly looked over my right shoulder, and it says timing. It should say perfect timing, shouldn't it?
It should say correct timing.
Correct timing.
Correct.
Good.
Or,
yeah. So we've alluded to it a little bit about how do you know that what you do is you go through the pyramid. So you've done your aerobic conditioning, you've done your hills, you add in another phase of fitness on, you've done your integration, which we haven't really covered, but we cover that on the course. And then we taper, and then you know you're ready for the day. And it's just so nice, because we've got people here. I've unmuted everybody. No, you're still muted, but you have the ability to unmute yourselves. So I'm just going to ask my last question, and I'm handing it over to people. So I'm asking Lorraine and Rod, really, and Greg, how did you know you were coming to your peak if we're doing about feeling-based training? I know you tell a story, Rod, about doing a mile. Was it 10 days before New York?
Yeah, about 2 weeks. About 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that timing happen for that to happen?
Well, I mean, it was pretty obvious that I had trained the best I'd ever done in my life. I mean, and so I knew, and I had a 2 mile time trial actually to do. And I called my brother in New Zealand, and I said, you know, John, he said, you know, I said, you've seen the training, you've seen how it's been flowing. And I said, you know what? I want to change that 2 mile to a mile. And he said, tell me about it. So I just told him it was a feeling base I had. There was something that I just wanted to put sugar-free icing on the cake. I wanted just to say, there was something that I just felt I wanted to do, and that it was to go out and run a mile. And he said, go do it, boy. I mean, he didn't ask any more questions. I went out, and I had my friend come to the Wyomissing high school track, and I said, I don't want any laps. I just want you to time me. And so I went about my training. And what I did is I shifted from a marathon runner back to my days of track running. And the whole environment was based around preparing as if I was in the Olympic Stadium or the British Championships or whatever. And I just went through that routine, and it brought back so many memories. It was a very powerful influence on me to feel that these were the days that defined me, because my favorite event, of course, is the mile. It always was the mile. And I went out there and I ran feeling based. I just listened to myself, and I went out there lap after lap for 4 laps. I crossed the line. He said, do you want to know? I said, no, I want to jog off. I did my little jog off, walk off, and came back. And he said, what do you think you ran? And I said, probably about 4.2, 4.1. He said, you ran 3:58.7. And so that just flowed through me every hair on my body stood up. I was just euphoric. And I said, it's done. It's done. There's nothing more that I can do, because this feeling has the feeling of perhaps that Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary had when they climbed Mount Everest. It was the absolute pinnacle of everything I'd done in my training. It was done. And so the next 10 to 12 days was running barefoot on the football field, or having a little jiggle jog in the forest. It was really, everything was done. And so when I left my town to go to New York, I knew I prepared the best that I could, and I was prepared for whatever came.
So the peaking, is really a matter of timing, to be able to get it so it's exactly on the day. And so that means that, you had that one thing that you needed to do, and a PR at that just left you, it just took you with the confidence to go on at the start line and know you had it right.
Yes.
And
everything. And that was, so there again, feeling based. I didn't dwell on going back through my diary every day to build confidence. I already had it there. It was already done. And so that was a very powerful feeling. And with all due respects to all my other races, I don't think I ever really did it as well as I did for New York. Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking people if they want to. Okay, so it's not often that we've got Lorraine, Rod, and Greg in the room here. It's a great opportunity. I know people are a little bit reticent about asking questions apart from me. I have got one up my sleeve if no one wants to ask Rod or Lorraine a question. But either type in your questions or unmute yourself and ask the questions. Greg, have you got anything else whilst people are thinking of questions about how to time the athlete?
Yeah, I feel like one of the guys that Rod was really helpful to me when I was coaching, the pro athlete Brett Gocher. He went through the Lydiard system, our training that we did with the pro team for 2 straight years, and he kept developing year after year. And I told him, I think you can run 2:10 for the marathon when he first joined the program. And he didn't believe me, of course, but I knew if we laid the foundation, we could get there. And I remember, and he did run 2:10 in his debut marathon. And I remember it was about a month before the race, and his sponsor came out. So they sent somebody out there taking pictures or something like that. And I had seen Brett change over these 2 years. His body and his mind slowly changed. And I remember he stripped off his sweats as we were going to do this track workout. And I remember the sponsor just going, holy cow, because he had risen. He had built himself ready for this ability to run 5 minutes per mile for 26.2. So I felt like, well, the way we did it and the way these athletes peak is that at first you're sort of challenging yourself to hit times and paces in training, but later you're holding yourself back and you're still hitting those times. It's just coming out of you. You have to be more controlled in your training because you're so fit. That's when I knew athletes were getting really ready for their best performance, was that they would finish runs and it wasn't as difficult as they expected. That was a sure sign that they were getting fitter and fitter, and they were really ready to go out. It's almost they had a calmness in their mind of that ability, like Rod said, to go out and challenge themselves to be their best. They were firm in their resolve to go and do that. So when you're building athletes toward a peak as a coach, I think you start to see how they're responding in training. Their body and their mind seem to just have this calmness to them, that change, the sculpting, if you will, of an athlete into a machine that can go out and run very fast on the day. I was so lucky to be able to do that with so many of the pro athletes, and then now even with the recreational athletes. It's a fun thing for sure.
There is a question there for Rod. How soon before that marathon did you run that 3:58 mile?
That was, I think, just on 12 days.
12 days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a big timing thing that in the last weeks is people mess it up because they do too much.
Yeah.
Right, or they don't have the confidence, so they try to reassure themselves and they go and do a workout and they leave their race on the training track. So it's very, very common, and as coaches, you know, you've got to hold people back, you know, and because they'll go off and do something to try to reassure themselves because they're used to having the daily training to tell them how well they're doing, and that is really because generally people are not confident in themselves, and they don't believe that they have maybe as much ability or confidence or whatever as they do. And I believe from just my years of being an athlete and then teaching these courses and coaching that we have everything we need to do what we want. It's just a matter of learning how to put all the pieces together and plug in the bits in the right way so that the whole system can fire up and go for that peak performance. And most people never really reach their potential. We human beings have incredible potential in all sorts of areas. You know, they say we only use 10% of our brain to begin with. Well, gee, you know, you use 12% and you're really ahead of everyone else, you know. And it's the same with training. But the thing about training is just the correct amount at the correct time is really important. And if you put too much into it, you actually get the opposite of what you're trying to do. So, and that's the biggest mistake, is that people are not confident. So they think, oh, well, if everybody's going to put in 100%, I'll put in 110%. And they go about it with that way, and they end up with the opposite of what they really wanted. And then they reinforce to themselves that they're not really good enough. Whereas it's just not, they're not training correctly, or they're not training in the right timing. And they just haven't put all the pieces together. They are violating those 5 principles. If you stick with them, you're going to pretty much have it.
Rod, Urban has said, not sure if it's been asked already. Please tell us a bit how your brother John, how did you come to make decisions together? Because it's pretty rare to have your brother coaching you. And he said, how does John feel about all that you achieved, he said?
Oh, yeah. It was a very incredible, and to this day, of course, you know, he's such a big person, a wonderful person in my life. And, you know, he's about the only one that can really have me in tears, you know. But he was, you know, before me, he joined the running club when he was 12. So I was only 9, and I thought this was cool because I was playing hockey and rugby and soccer and basketball, but of course I was a fast little guy, and they always put me on the wing, and I never got to see the ball. So, but to go out for a run with my brother was something that, well, there's no stopping and there's no starting. We just go out and have fun, and so. Often I would go out with him, and you know, I just wanted to be like my brother. I just wanted to be like him, and so that really flowed through. And even when he was in his 18, and he finished 2nd in the New Zealand Mile Championships, and did some incredible things. He was very, very close to a 4-minute mile, sub 4-minute mile in his day. Won 2 New Zealand cross country championships. So he was a very fine athlete in his own right, but he saw more potential in me. And so he started to work with me, and wonderfully, as I said, that Arthur Lydiard would come to our club and coach the coaches. So John understood it all and then adapted it to how we were going to do it. And he was a very fine coach. So his training of me, he kind of protected his little brother. and he would say that was it, you know. And I remember he got he said, now you fill this jug of water to how you want to be, because I filled the jug right up to the rim. And then he got a glass and he said, now this is you. And then he poured the water into the glass and he said, and that's it. So what you're wanting to do here won't fit into your glass. So we have to understand that more is not better. And so I started to understand all these little things he had along the way, these little tests of time. And he would go out and he'd say to me sometimes, you know, come out for a run. And I remember he went out and he was on the bike and he was running with me. And I'm thinking, you know, soon enough, we're going to turn around and go back. And then we kept going and kept going. And then I said, when are we turning back? And he said, well, I'm turning back now and so are you. And that was like, he knew exactly when he took me, or how far. But another time he took me out to, he said, we're going to run out to Mungawai Beach. And he said, and then my wife is going to come and pick us up. So we got out to the beach and he turned around and rode home and he said, now you figure out how to get home. And I said, whoa, I thought we were going to do an hour, and it ended up being a 2-hour run. So those are the things. So I had to understand then how to get back safely, because there's another training session tomorrow. So I learned extremes, you know, the highs, bring the highs down, bring the lows up, and be consistent in your training.
Brilliant. Thanks, Rod. There's a good question. Greg, can you answer that one? Because I'd like to hear the coaches. It says, all the talk has been about running. What other training would you advocate, i.e. core cross? So what do your top athletes do about core conditioning you tell us.
Well, every athlete, no matter if they're a new runner or they're a pro runner, they're all doing ancillary training or prehab training before you get injured to build the body. One of the things we learned from Arthur, that was the purpose of the hill phase, right? Was to prepare the body to be stronger so it could do the faster running. We augment that with lots of core stability and mobility work, even some balance work and some dynamic work. So I think all athletes need to be doing, particularly these days, right? Because our lifestyle is so sedentary and we don't have as much sort of physical activity as just part of our lives. We need to add those in. So at least 2 to 3 days per week, athletes are doing, or at least I'm advocating, giving them the routines of doing their core strength, mobility, running form drills, as well as some dynamic and even relaxation work, whether it be yoga or some of those types of things. So you have to do all of that as part of being an athlete. And as Rod mentioned before, that you're preparing yourself so you can handle more training, but then a component of it is during that rest time when you're sort of not doing the running, that's where the body's building stronger. That's a perfect time to do some of those restorative things like yoga and ice baths. So I think it's a full complex of being a good athlete is not just running, but you do have to do these other components. And as Lorraine mentioned earlier, you probably have a weak link. So you definitely need to be working on that part of the body to shore it up so that then you can go out and handle the training.
Bill, you had a question about what you do if time's against you.
Yes. Do you want to read it out? Or...
No, I want you to ask it.
Well, in effect, if you find you've got a deadline, like a championship, but you've got strong aerobic conditioning, can you truncate or part of the pyramid? For example, if you're suddenly selected for a key race or there's a qualifying time to get or something like that, or a championship, is there a way of speeding things up, assuming the aerobic conditioning?
Yes.
This is on the minds of lots of people trying to get qualifying times for this year's British champs, because it's not a reason.
So I'll take it away. So being able to qualify for something. So you have to do a little peak before, but you don't want to take it away from your key race, but you need to do it. So qualifying is also always an issue, and for coaches who are,
that's not quite it, Lorraine. It's more where you may have lost some time because either for injury at the time that you might have started, say, the hills or whatever, or they've just put in a arbitrary deadline to hit some qualifying times, or they've moved the championship date forward or something like that. The sort of things that are happening around COVID, I'm really working on. And suddenly people find that they've got to do something in 5 or 6 weeks, which they weren't expecting to have to do. So that's
yeah, and that said, so the biggest mistake is that if you've got the aerobic conditioning, then all you need to be doing to get to a race is you can accelerate somewhat by doing a tweaking. That's, but you don't want to suddenly jump in and do these big interval workouts, which is the big mistake that people make, because they need to be timed specifically away from the race to get that effect. But that training effect that you're getting is really minimal compared to what you are going to get from your aerobic capacity that you have. So you can, by doing fast work, you precipitate a peak. Okay, when you do long work, it takes you further away. So you can play with those two factors, doing longer work to slow down the peak, doing faster work to speed up the peak. The big thing is not doing too much volume. And we go into that in the when we talk in the integration phase of the training, how to balance those two. And some people come on very, very quickly, probably because of their muscle type fibers, and if they have a fast twitch, you can give them a little bit of speed and suddenly they start running a lot more quickly, very, very fast. And likewise, you get the slow twitch fiber person who could probably be doing strides and faster type work earlier on, just to get their cadence going, because they're just long, lopey, skinny legs type people. So it depends on your type of person, and you will find that you can speed some people up very, very quickly, and others will take longer. But if you have that aerobic capacity, you can actually race very well off aerobic capacity. Didn't you find that, Rod? You getting some races, and and you're doing the base, and
If you guys have ever had to do that at short notice?
Yes, we have.
You're trying to get selected for something, and they say, "Oh, you need to go out and do a race next week," and you go, "Oh, geez, you know, officialdom would do it to us all the time, wouldn't they, Rod?"
No different now.
What I found, I have a darker side. You might know of Bill, and I went to university together. I don't know if he knows my darker side, but I work for. You do. I work for British Triathlon, and they're very regimented. I know Rod likes riding his bike, but whether he swims as well, I don't know. But they're very regimented, and they said to the athletes that I was coaching, they've got to do this time at this time in the year, and then 6 weeks after I want them to do this one, and 6 weeks after they want to do that one, and 6 weeks after that, as though it was a straight line. And I said, don't work like that. See, they might really quickly, but then it all comes up at the end. And then all of a sudden, that ends when they're peaked. They're flying. I said, and so that's the other thing to bear in mind, is that, like Lorraine says, how do you get that acceleration? And I think you've got to know the athlete. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, how are you anyway? Just to say, how many peaks in a year do you think you can manage at most?
It's a 24-week pyramid, so then you would have two major peaks, but you can also sustain a peak. And so here's another good Lydiard myth busting, because you don't train for 6 months for one race. Okay,
no, I could hold for about 3 weeks max.
You could hold it for about 3 weeks, and generally the adage goes that the bigger the base, the higher the peak, and the longer you can sustain it for. So so you can actually surf the peaks once you get there and have quite a few races. We have a schedule that you can use, which we call race week, non-race week schedule. And depending on what your basis is, and it also depends on how long you have been doing the training for, like how many years you have under your belt, you can generally ride the wave for quite a long time. But when you drop off, like 3 weeks is yours, you're good for doing a peak race and then 3 more. Have you done I presume you're Andrew. It says you're Jane and Andrew, but I presume you're Andrew.
I'm definitely an Andrew, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So have you done a pyramid type training?
Yeah. I mean, I was probably a bit like Colin. I was brought up in the 70s, 80s with a coach that loved the Lydiard method. So I've been with it for a long time.
Yeah.
Due to work, I stopped running, came back, and everything had changed. And I'm slowly going back to the old ways again, because I feel better by doing that. You know, it's just...
Yeah.
I mean, the other part of the question is really, could you hold the base phase for longer?
Yes. So generally what happens, and if you remember that graph that Colin showed that Greg had done with Jack Daniels, where you do a type of training, and then when it starts to level out, you do another type of training, you add something else. So it's just a way of stimulating the body. So what we're looking for is, when you're doing a training type, say you're doing base, and we have a certain workout we call out and back that will give you some kind of like where your aerobic condition is, and it should be improving. And when that starts to flatten out over the weeks, you're ready for a new stimulus. And that's when you want to jump in. Now, a lot of people just do the same old training over and over and over again, and the body's going, oh, ho-hum, I know that. You know, there's nothing new here for me. And so that's when you get the plateau in training. And that's what a lot of people, older people do. They start doing what's safe, and they're not adding something new and interesting for the body and stimulating in a new way. So the pyramid is a great antidote to that plateau training.
Rod, Rod and John Walker and the Kiwis came over to Europe, and you were here the whole summer racing the European truck circuit, but you did a fairly big aerobic base, because I've found, Lorraine and I sort of came to the theory that the longer your aerobic base, the longer you can maintain your peak for. But did you find that you could come?
Yes, I think certainly once we switched from having our New Zealand season during January, that was our training preparations. Right, so we would go into aerobic training rather than be influenced of racing every weekend for the club, because once we got into the UK, it was in those days we couldn't sort of catch a plane all the way back again in short notice. So we were over there for the duration. So we built that base, but we also recognized that when we were in Europe, that we still had to go off and do that 2 weeks or 10 days of aerobic, easy running, and we would often go to training like in Busan and Sweden, or Veramäki in Finland, to even the Adidas Sport Hotel down in Hirschenauer, Asiago in Italy. We had these training bases where we would go and just go back to do long, slow running, and really the racing kept us going. So we didn't do a lot of, we did stride outs, but we didn't do a lot of racing or a lot of time trials because, we didn't do a lot of time trials during those periods because the racing was giving us the peaks. And so we would say, look, I don't really want to run a 5K. I'd rather run a 1500 or 3000. And so you would discuss with the meet promoter because you knew what was coming up later on. You wanted to do Oslo, Stockholm, Helsinki. You wanted to do Rome. You wanted to do Milan. You wanted to do Pisa. So you knew what peaks you wanted. So in between time, you had to go back to laying your foundation.
Great. Any more questions?
Well, there was one from Ron. Hi, Ron. How's everything going? Yeah. So,
good,
yeah, excellent. Yeah. So would you like to ask the question?
Yeah, sure. And Lorraine, I think you touched upon this when you were talking earlier about the peak state. You feel like you're on wings and you're just flying and nothing can go wrong. But convert that to lay speak. I mean, from your races, what did you think of pain and effort? Were they just, did you not think of them at all, or did you feel like you had a better coping mechanism for pain? Or were you in the zone and you didn't think about it at all? I mean, just talk to us about.
Well, I tell you, yeah, when you're in that peak state, it doesn't feel like pain. It feels wonderful. There's only sort of maybe the biggest pain is the mental pain of the unknown. You're gonna, yeah. Arthur was asked in one of his last talks, so on his tour, before he went to Dallas where he died, he was in Boulder, and he had about 400 people show up to listen to him talk. And somebody stood up and said, what did your athletes do about pain? How did they cope with the pain barrier? And Arthur thought about it for a minute, and then he got sort of a bit huffy and he said, pain? My athletes didn't feel pain. They love to run. And that's exactly what it is. You're tapping a state, which is wonderful feeling. And when you're going through the training and you're developing your feeling base, you learn to distinguish between what your body is saying and what is real pain. So you have a discomfort because you are pushing yourself and you're going into areas where you haven't gone before, and that can be discomfort. And we also have all our belief systems around going into those areas because we like to stay where we're safe. So there's that. And then there is pain, and pain is telling you to stop because what you're doing is causing injury. And to know the difference is really key. And any athlete who has, risen to the top, they know the difference. They know the difference between what is pain and what is discomfort. And you learn to live with discomfort. When you do anaerobic training, you learn the discomfort of having this acidity build up in your body. And but you learn to treat it as information. It's just valuable information. And then you go into the race and you're reading this valuable information, like, okay, can I go a bit faster? Can I relax into it more? Can I cover this move? Can I do whatever? And your body will tell you where it's at. And that way you can race at the razor's edge and get the most out of yourself in the race. Do you find that, Rod? It wasn't painful, was it? You loved doing it.
No, Yeah, but you learn to understand the levels of discomfort, and you know, most of the time you can say, I've been here before. I know not to panic. I know that it's feeling based, and that's what we develop ourselves to build that resistance to that pain. Is you've got to understand it, and you've got to work through it, and you've got to live with it, and don't fear it. Just embrace it, because it's part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yvonne, you've got a question.
Time for one more. Probably.
Hi, sorry.
Hi, Siobhan.
This is
Hi,
the break.
going at the spot. Yeah, this really directed probably towards Rod and Greg. How do you start to help people to begin to trust their own biofeedback system, so they're not driven by paces that are often got off pace calculators, which are great and all that, but as you say, there are guidelines? And how do you encourage them to kind of tune into themselves, forget the Strava, stop aiming for those suffer scores or whatever they're called? I'm not really a Strava person, but they used to call them suffer scores, I think. And stop worrying about having, as Lorraine said, this kind of wonderful training diary, and instead trust that their body's telling them the right messages. How do you actually do that in practice? I mean, it's all very well to say it, but what are the nuts and bolts of that? And Rod, in particular, like you were saying that for the New York City one, it was probably the best prep you'd ever done in your life, because you stopped running with groups and sort of competing with each other as you do in groups, or running at the pace they've set when really you need to be going a bit slower or faster or whatever. So really kind of putting yourself center of that, but then you really do have to listen to your own body, because on the night it may tell you something different to what the plan said. So, you know, any advice, please?
Well, from my journey, understanding. I mean, I was surrounded by some amazing people, and one of my actually our mailman was a yoga teacher, and he would stride down the hill and stride back up the hill, and of course in the summer he would just wear a little running shorts, and I don't think he ever put the mail in the mailboxes, because all the housewives are out there to get it handed to them. But he was such an influence on us about feeling based. So he would go for a run, and he'd say, stop, and we would walk. We'd take a little walk, and he'd go, now, tell me how you feel. And I thought, wow, I feel that, and he just got us to talk about it. And sometimes we would go down to the recreation ground, which was right next to the beach. And he says, right now, take your shoes and socks off and put them under the hedge or under the tree, and we're going to walk across the grass. Now, what do you feel when you walk across the grass? What do you feel about when you're walking on the sand? What do you feel about when we go into the ocean? And he got us to describe how we felt about things. And he said, so this is what you've got to learn to do every day in your training. Feeling based, know yourself, feel yourself, so that you know, so that when the training comes, you go, yes, I've been down this journey, this trail before. I know what to feel. And so that was how I learned, because we didn't have any other way of defining. So we had to individually define who we were. And it was neat to be able to sit around in a group. And that's where my brother encouraged it all, is to sit around the group and for everyone to express how they felt about the training and what they felt today. And it was amazing, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I felt that, but I didn't talk about it. And so you broaden out your ability to express everything you're experiencing, and that you learn by that. You understand way better. So that's how I can explain it. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll add that I start prescribing runs by effort, so that I call them effort-based workouts instead of pace-based workouts. and begin to sprinkle those in. And so the only directions that are given are based on effort. And of course, at the beginning, they don't like that. They come back, well, what pace is that supposed to be, right? And so we have to have the conversation about, let's start to learn your different effort levels. And we can make it easy, right? Easy, medium, hard. We can make it more complicated. Easy, easy, medium, 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 hard. We can get more involved with that. Some people use the ratings of perceived exertion. So RPE, use a 4 to 5 on this run, 6 to 7. So start to sprinkle that in, actually prescribe it as the workout. And then they don't have a choice, right? You're only caring about what does it feel like. And when they come back with the result, you don't care at all about the paces. You only talk about, how did you feel? Did you feel like you were in the right zone? Did you go too fast? Because usually that's the best method of teaching, right? Is they'll go too fast potentially. So prescribing those effort-based, fartlek runs are a great example, or out and back, or even progression run type runs are wonderful. So if you force it in the training plan itself to where that's the goal of the workout, is for you to explore your effort, then they start to see that. They get more comfortable. It can take 2 or 3 or 4 workouts before they're comfortable understanding the different effort levels. And then usually the light bulb starts to go off. And then they like it. They actually like that they can do a run and the watch won't ruin it. Because you've probably had athletes that they'll do a great run, they feel great, they love it, then they download the results, and then they're upset because the watch doesn't, mesh with what their feeling is. And boy, as a coach, that really stinks, because here was an athlete that felt really positive about their training, and now it's a negative. So I think that's a real opportunity in our training, is to sprinkle in these effort-based workouts where we're only talking about effort. We don't want to hear about anything else. And that gives them starts that education toward learning to remove the watch. And I like what Lorraine said, you train from the inside out, not the outside in.
Okay, thank you both.
Yeah, can I just say that we based a quarter effort, half effort, 3/4 effort, 7/8 full. So those are our range. And so my brother would say to me, you go out and run a half effort ride. And so we knew exactly how to dial into a half effort or a quarter effort. And sometimes we would do that on the track, and he would say, I want you to run a full 40 yards or a lap at a half effort. And he would go out, and of course he'd time us, and he'd go, that wasn't half effort, was it? And I go, why? And they go, that's way too fast. So we learned. So he would test us from time to time. I go out, and I remember I'd done, I think about 12 or 14 400s. And now as I got older, I would do them clockwise and counterclockwise. So I do the first 4 clockwise, the next 4, and I could run within a second either way around the track. And in fact, I challenge you to get your runners, if they do a 1 mile time trial, get them to run it the other way. Get them to do it to clockwise, and see how they go. Because a lot of runners can't run left and right. They're so used to running left all the time. Get them to run the other way, and it helps them to understand there's a balance to all this. So quarter effort, half effort, 3/4, 7/8, full effort. And I could go out and pretty well dial it in every time.
Thank you, Rod. Can I just, we're at 2 o'clock, so we need to wind up. I know there's a couple more questions, and yes, we do take breaks. I think Rod and I both took breaks at the end of our season, had some time off, and ultra running is, there's a question there from Wendy about ultra running. So we can address that later on, but the thing is, for even ultra runners, that your emphasis is ultimately on your aerobic conditioning, but you still need to do it within the parameters of what the human body is most effective doing. So yes, certainly you do want to have long runs. And how long? Well, as you watch the Law of Diminishing Returns, So in training, always you've got to watch for, in the training session, where you're not getting the return from the effort that you're putting in. So how long is too long? It depends on the person and where they're at the time. So if you watch for that, then but certainly if you're doing ultras, then you want to spend time on your feet and get used to that, so that the musculoskeletal system is strong enough to do what you're doing without getting injured. So I would like to thank Greg and Rod for being our special guests and coming in today. And thank you. So it's for every and giving up their time. And I would also like to say something about the courses that are coming up. So if you are interested in doing our Lydiard 1 and 2, they're lots of fun. We have special guests. Colin and I do them together, full of information. And I think we have a lot of coaches here who've been through the course who will vouch for that. And so we have one on Saturday evenings in the US, which is every Saturday through August, so starts August 1st. And you can get online to lydiardfoundation.org or go to lydiardfoundation.uk.org for Colin's site, and the information will be there on how to sign up. We do have a special going at the moment. If somebody has real hardship in these times, and I know a lot of people aren't working, and if you really want to do the course but you can't really afford it, we could probably give you a discount. Just write and ask. And then we have another course which takes place in the second week in August, and that is more to suit the UK people. And it will be a Monday to Thursday evenings, 2.5 hours, or is it 3 hours at a time? And we also offer our exam preview, which is a lot of fun. We practice case studies and going through the exam and all the questions, and it's quite a comprehensive exam because we do want you, if you're going to coach using our certification, know what you're doing. So we make sure, and we will walk you through it. We will get you certified if you want to be certified, so don't be afraid of the exam. I know some people don't like taking exams and they go, oh, okay, I wouldn't do that, but that they have actually learnt a lot from it. So that course is coming up. And then for you UK people, we have had scheduled live, a real get together in Clun, Shropshire.
Yeah. In Shropshire, Woodbury North for the Shropshire people here.
Okay, okay, Shropshire North, yeah.
The 12th and 13th of September, but there are concerns about whether we can put it on or not. But we're going to have to make a decision within the next 2 weeks, I think, the range. Yeah.
So if it needs to be put off, then it will be in October. We love doing the in-person, but we've found actually that the Zoom has worked better than we thought and have enjoyed it much more, and we're getting better at doing it. So so that's a good thing. So I hope you'll join us. Please feel free to write to me if you have any questions, Lorraine@lydiardfoundation.org, or you can get onto the websites and contact us, and please spread the good word. Remember, champions are everywhere. You just have to train them correctly. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. Great to see you. Great to see everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Cheery, bye.
Cheers,
bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rod Dixon. Oh, blimey. Lorraine Moller. What a night. Thanks, guys. That was fantastic.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. I'm going to close down in a little bit. Yeah. How was that, you guys that are still there?
Great. Really good.
Okay, excellent.
Was really
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I'll probably sign up for the course coming soon. Last time I couldn't take it, but
Kashan? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you?
I'm in Canada, Montreal.
Okay. Yeah. So either of those courses would work.
Yeah, I'll take one that's down in the US probably. The time works better for me.
Yeah. So we do it Saturday evening, and then our Australian and New Zealand people will join us, and it'll be Sunday morning for them. But it's very hard to go and accommodate people from both UK and Europe and down under. So we're doing pretty good though.
How many Saturdays are we talking about?
Every
3?
Saturday
4?
in August.
Okay, that's about 4 Saturdays, I guess.
It's 5. Yeah.
Okay, 5. Okay.
They're 3 hours, and it's a 15-hour course. And if you miss something, we record them so you can catch up.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you'll be Saturday evening. You won't be going out dancing. Okay. You'll be doing class.
No, I'm too old for that.
No, never too old. Never too old to dance. Okay. Yeah.
In like 15 years, I didn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm going to stop the recording and